I think we're quite far from lasting peace. I think where everybody's just trying to get to immediately is a lasting ceasefire. And I think from the Israeli perspective, and Dan laid this out, look, their view has long been from the Netanyahu government that only a military campaign that fundamentally wipes out the totality of Hamas is going to ensure Israel's security, and that in turn can start to be a bridge toward peace. The problem is that in the meantime, we've obviously seen mass starvation in Gaza. We've seen tens of thousands of Palestinians killed. And so the world is clearly now reacting with a lot more angst and concern than we've seen previously. We're seeing recognition of a state of Palestine, not because I think the British and Canadian and French governments think the Palestinians are ready for it, but because they really feel like there's no chits left in order to be able to compel Israel to take a different decision. The idea of a full-scale frankly, invasion of Gaza City, people should remember there was one already in 2023 in November, just as the war started. It actually was one of the attacks that Israel had that led to the very first ceasefire later in November of 23. The fact that we're back here again should tell you how hard it is to keep control of Gaza and to actually wipe out Hamas in the way that the Israelis are hoping to.
Jonathan, when you have escalating actions like this, does this mean that it's a sign that the war is not close to ending?
I think that's a political decision ultimately. I think militarily, you've had a lot of senior Israeli officials, both current and former, say there really is not a strategic military objective left. There certainly are tactical ones. There certainly are more Hamas fighters that can be killed. There's probably more tunnels that can be collapsed. But there's not a strategic military objective, which means it's not clear anymore what it is that the political leaders are actually looking to do. And so without that clear strategy, whether or not it's actually closer to the end of the war is ultimately going to be a decision by Netanyahu as to whether or not he feels like he has the victory that he wants. Complete victory of wiping out every single Hamas individual is going to be pretty difficult.
Well, Jonathan, what do you think is his endgame here, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you believe him when he says he doesn't want Israel to govern Gaza long term? Do you believe that? Is that part of his endgame?
I think he doesn't want Israel to govern Gaza long term. I think there's many in his coalition, including folks on the more ultra-nationalist side, like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who very much do want to govern Gaza and see the opportunity for, frankly, resettlement into Gaza. But the problem is, even if Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want to govern Gaza, even as now he's saying, look, there'll be this military operation, and from the military operation, there'll be a civilian-led Gazan entity to lead it, a technocratic government, an Arab help from the outside, whether forces or others. Right now, what he's doing is going to push everybody further away. Part of the reason that we're in this strategic predicament is that there's never been a diplomatic solution from Israel that's been acceptable. For almost 2 years now, a lot of folks have said, okay, what is the day after plan? Arab states were willing to help, European states were willing to help, and none was actually presented. The idea that Arabs and Gazans and others now are going to come in while the Israeli military is in Gaza City and in the rest of Gaza Strip and say, no, now we're going to be willing to help is just not reasonable. The reality is they're going to be afraid in Riyadh, in Abu Dhabi, that they'll look complicit if they work with the Israelis more. And so it gets back to this question, I think, of, look, you got probably 6 weeks till the campaign starts in October. Can the time be used to pressure Hamas to come back to the table so that the type of campaign that's being described actually is averted ultimately?
One thing I do wonder, how much of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's political existence, political career as prime minister is tied to this war going on?
There's certainly been something that's been suggested by a lot of folks, and I think for good reason. Look, at the beginning of the war, the first even 16, 18 months, I think there was reason to say there were still strategic military objectives that were required to undertake to ensure Israel's security. But now Israel has frankly taken out almost the entire top three levels of Hamas leadership. They've collapsed tunnels. The border is secure in a way that it frankly hasn't been in decades. I think for Netanyahu, though, the war helps him survive politically. He needs the far right in order to do that, including some of the ultranationalists I already mentioned. And the truth of the matter is, he knows that if he were to end this coalition and even get into an alternative coalition with, say, some more of the centrist or even center-right individuals, folks like Benny Gantz, who was in the cabinet, obviously, originally, that would be a real challenge because eventually the end goal, once the war would conclude, would be to topple the government and move to elections. One way or the other, the Israelis are going to face elections next year. October of 26, they have to happen by. Maybe they'll happen sooner. There's going to be this question of whether Netanyahu's own political and legal problems, as he's still having to deal with corruption cases, will be meaningfully resolved by then. I think it's doubtful. And so therefore, for him, there is a benefit in the war continuing.